Blog Talk Radio.
Well, good morning, everyone. Thank you for tuning in to freedomizerradio.com. And this is Cheryl, and I'll be your host for the next hour. See the power in you. And we're going to get our program started here just as soon as we have played a little bit of music. Tatiana Morez will be with us on November 10th at 4 p.m. Pacific time. So I hope that you will. Let me check in backstage for you. I know we had a new announcement this morning for Gadsden Rising, and I want to share that information with you. I can do that until we get this all settled up and straightened out. I'm not going to sing, I promise. At least not yet. Okay, today Gadsden's Rising show isn't for those who are trying to decide whether to vote for Corporate Puppet D or Corporate Puppet R. The mainstream media talks enough about this. The show is for those who are trying to decide whether to vote for another party's candidate or whether to vote at all. Our first guest is Mark Smith. After spending decades, first as a voter and then as an election integrity activist, Mark has been an election boycott advocate since 2006. He's the author of an e-book called Consent to Tyranny, Voting in the USA. That is available on Kindle for 99 cents or on his website. I'll make this a little bigger so I can read it. FUBARANDGRILL.org. FUBARandGrill.org. This year he's been working with other election boycott activists and organizers to encourage people to stop voting. He says that we can't just continue to leave important decisions up to government. They've been doing a lousy job, and given that our survival is at stake, we have to start making those decisions ourselves. Libby's second guest is Doug Harmon, the chairman of Libertarian Party in Georgia. Judy Lynn Cole is our regular co-host on Wednesdays, bringing us some wonderful information on health, as well as continued updates on her project, Ringing of the Rivers.
Cheryl, you know I'm here, right?
There we go. I got somebody else's mic live.
It's Nancy. It's Nancy Lee Bentley.
Nancy.
Hello.
Welcome.
Yeah, good. We got Nancy then.
Yeah.
Oh, excellent.
Having some challenges calling in to your board today.
Nancy, I'm waiting for your book to come. I'm so very, very excited.
It's a great time now. This is so apropos, all of this. It's really exciting that we're having this. Again, thank you for having me back on.
Oh, my God. And I did want to contact you, too. Diana Gray has graciously offered to help me coordinate a program down in Temecula where she lives. And we want to do a See the Power in the Food You Eat.
Great. That's awesome.
Right. So
good for you, ladies.
Yeah. And I don't know how we might be able to include you directly in that, but certainly indirectly through promoting your book. Diana has been so sweet and is so impressed with the materials that she has heard on the radio here on Wednesday programs for the last month that she got your book.
Great.
She made copies of the front page, she made copies of the contents page, and one other page, and she's been passing that around to her friends.
Oh, that's great.
I know. She's just such a wonderful promoter, and she's such a huge advocate of our radio programs, and now she's just this huge fan of yours. I think we have Judy.
I think, am I live?
You're live.
Well, I tell you, I think we're getting tricked here on Halloween. We've got a little trick or treat going on.
That's what it was. No wonder why we had the problem.
Trick or trick?
Yes, I think we've been tricked a little bit to steal a little, to take away a little bit of our time. We have today on our show the two authors and activists that I consider to be the Dolly Madison and the Paul Revere of creating awareness and sounding the alarm about GMO foods. I'm going to start with introducing, I know, Nancy, you've been talking for a couple of seconds, but Nancy Lee Bentley is a dynamic, nationally known holistic health expert. She's a chef, fabulous chef, technical food and nutrition specialist. She's a healthy foods marketing consultant, a writer, a speaker, and a teacher. She's co-author of Dr. Mercola's Total Health Program, and her widely published books include her breakthrough new book, Truly Cultured. She's also written another book called Eat Less for $40 a week or less. She's the originator of the Food Circle community and has been sowing the seeds of health and champion vital foods and sustainable communities for over 30 years. She's been called a pioneer in the fields of natural organic foods, sustainable food systems, and holistic health. And Nancy Lee has been in the trenches for many years with our other guest, which I hope, Jeffrey, you're live. Jeffrey M. Smith is the director of Genetic Roulette, The Gamble of Our Lives. This is a fabulous documentary. Once you watch it, it will open so many eyes. If you're going to buy something for Christmas, I recommend that you buy this for everyone on your list. If you can't get them to consume a gift of health, maybe you can educate them so they will begin. Jeffrey M. Smith is also the best-selling author of two books, Genetic Roulette and Seeds of Deception, and he's the executive director of Institute for Responsible Technology. And Nancy Lee, since I'd like for you to start with telling us, how did you and Jeffrey get started together, working together, and then do we have Jeffrey live?
I had someone live here a moment ago, and the call dropped, so I'm waiting for him to call back in.
Okay, well, Nancy, if you would,
Judy, you know
give
what?
us some background.
We should really, you know what? Before we get into that, we should actually acknowledge what today is. It's Halloween,
yes.
and
yes,
what?
And we're going to talk about Frankenfoods.
Yeah, how appropriate is that? Not only Frankenfoods, we got Frankenfoods and a Frankenstorm in this very appropriate Halloween time. What do you know? Is that not appropriate?
And we've got somebody Franken-messing with Freedomizer.
Well, just think about all of the people today that are going to be. This is the big candy day of the year for sweets and treats and stuff like that. Well, gosh, this is how appropriate is this, right? We've got major problems with the whole. Well, this is the food of the day with the sugar and the candy and that. But
well, it's not food. It's neurotoxin.
Yeah, you're right. Exactly, Judy. It really is. But we put it in our mouth and we call it food. That's ridiculous. There's so much that's been messed with, and of course, you know, and I know both, the problems are not just one or two, like it's going to rot your teeth or something. Rot your teeth, right? You know what? The candy issue and the sweets issue is one of the biggest ones we've got with carbohydrate addiction and stuff. And literally now we have a really addictive food, very manipulated. Most people, they're not realizing that this candy that they're eating, the bulk of it is sweetened with what? High fructose corn syrup. It used to. Now it's sugar. Sugar used to be a problem. Now it's the lesser of the evils. Except not really, because now even the sugar's been messed with.
Even the sugar beets have been genetically modified.
But
people aren't aware. They're just not aware that candy is a high glycemic. They aren't aware it's addictive. And they aren't aware what it can do to your liver. I mean,
The liver and
it hits your liver just like alcohol does. And now it's also genetically modified.
That's
not
one
only
of the big
corn syrup
problems.
and corn, the corn syrup, the corn sugar, and the sugar beets are genetically modified. Plus, that candy has quite often been on the shelf for over a year, so it's also full of fungus and mold. You know, I'll tell you what I want to hear next year from my granddaughter. When I ask her, what are you going to be for Halloween, I hope she looks at me and says, Grandma Woo Woo, I'm going to be GMO free.
Wouldn't that be lovely? Ladies,
that's great. That would be super.
Yeah, ladies, I have our caller from area code 561.
You got it.
That's Jeffrey.
That's me.
Oh, great.
Jeffrey, I apologize for the mix-up today on the getting the radio show online. I think we've been tricked a little bit.
Well, you know, anytime something like that happens to me, I always blame Monsanto. So I would say just blame Monsanto.
Blame Monsanto.
But you know what? We're doing it. We must be doing something right because we're getting resistance, right, Jeffrey?
That's right. I mean, the thing is, right now, we represent all living beings, all future generations, everyone who eats. They represent corporate profits. Somehow they're still in the game. I don't understand why. With all that we've got going for us, they're still in the game. But right now we are absolutely on track to have a huge change. And I'm in California right now working with Prop 37 supporters and looking like we're going to win in California, although it's very close. But once people realize what's in their food, once they realize that they've got the genetically engineered foods right there, 53% of Americans say that they would avoid GMOs. So I think that would be too much of a drop in market share for companies like Kraft and Nestle's who've already removed GMOs in Europe to continue to sell GMOs to the no longer unsuspecting U.S. population.
And right on. Thanks to you, Jeffrey. You've been the single most handed proponent for getting the message out about the problems with genetically modified organisms and the importance of eating healthy and being conscious about what you're doing. You have my deep thanks and gratitude.
You're most welcome.
Yeah, you have all of our thanks, Jeffrey. I've been touting you as the Paul Revere of ringing the bell about genetically modified foods, and I call Nancy Lee the Dolly Madison. I mean, this is a revolution, but we need to make having GMO as an ingredient in our food a marketing liability to the food manufacturers. Can you give us some background? Because not everyone is aware of what genetically modified organisms are. Can you give us some background and explain what is a GMO?
Okay, genetically engineered foods or genetically modified organisms are those where the DNA, typically of viruses or bacteria, have been forced into the DNA of plants like soybeans and corn. The two primary reasons they genetically engineer are either to allow the crops to withstand doses of toxic weed killer, primarily Monsanto's Roundup, and the plant then stores the Roundup in large part in the food portion which we eat, and Roundup is linked to cancer, birth defects, endocrine disruption, Parkinson's disease, etc. And the other variety is those that create their own toxic insecticide that break open the stomach of insects to kill them. And we just found out this year that the same Bt toxin produced in Monsanto's corn does in fact break open little holes in human cells, and that could be the same mechanism by which it kills insects and might be related to leaky gut and other disorders that we're seeing on the rise in the United States. So these were introduced in 1996. Soy, corn, cotton, canola, sugar beets, alfalfa for animals, and then there's also Hawaiian and Chinese papaya, zucchini, and crookneck squash. These are the only genetically modified food crops, but the other side, the biotech industry, wants to genetically engineer 100% of all commercial seeds as genetically engineered, and also insects and animals and trees.
They don't have a clue, do they?
Well,
I tell you, we don't have a chance unless we get a handle on this. I mean, this is genocide. I don't care how you spell it. It's really genocide.
Well, they do have some interesting statistics here. When GMOs were introduced, the number of Americans with 3 or more chronic illnesses nearly doubled within 9 years. Food allergies doubled. Asthma skyrocketed. Autism was up. Infertility is up. In fact, the categories of diseases and disorders that the American Academy of Environmental Medicine identified in the lab animals who were fed GMOs are reproductive, immune, and gastrointestinal disorders, as well as organ damage, accelerated aging, and insulin problems. And these are the ones on the rise in the U.S. population. And when I travel around to doctors' offices and interview them and their patients who they prescribe non-GMO diets to, or I speak in talks now and I ask how many people have avoided GMOs and what changes you've noticed, we're finding that people are getting better from these same disorders and diseases, whether it's weight problems, allergies, skin problems, infertility, brain fog, anxiety, etc., even diabetes. And when the livestock are switched from GM soy and corn to non-GM soy and corn, they too are getting better from these same categories of diseases, sometimes within 2 or 3 days.
Jeffrey, I want to talk for just a second about the livestock, because this will give our listeners some hope also for results that they can see with their own families. I was in Southern California for 7 weeks back in 2009, and when I got back, I have pet ducks, and they were acting strangely, and I asked my partner, had the feed been changed, and I was told no. But the ducks were fighting with each other. They were fighting over organic bread treats, and the drake was pecking me whenever I would try to lock him up at night. I mean, these were pets, and he was attacking me whenever I would try to lock them in the cage at night because he was trying to communicate with me something was wrong. I even went out and looked at the feed bag, and the feed bag looked the same. So then I called my feed supplier and found out that the manufacturer had been sold out and that the new manufacturer had GMO corn in the feed.
This is very interesting, this is extremely interesting, yes.
Once I got, it took me a couple of weeks. I drive 2 hours one way to go pick up organic duck feed so that I know what they're getting. Within 4 days of the ducks being put back on organic food, they were back to acting normal. They were back to being good pets. They were back to being healthier acting animals. In the period of time between when I could not get the organic feed, one of my hens, duck hens, she sprained her ankle and could not walk. And I put her on Sun formula. My partner came unglued. He says, "You can't afford to feed a duck Sun formula." And I said, the vet bill would be more expensive. Well, we got her up and going, but that motivated us to really find the organic foods. In 4 days' time, they appeared to be back to normal. But, I didn't eat a single egg the rest of the year.
This is very interesting. I got to tell you, go ahead.
One other thing I want to make people aware of. Also, I went to our local health food store and got organic juice. My girlfriend and I got organic juice. Before we were out the door, we were both deathly ill. I felt like I had been shot down the spine. Neither one of us could hardly walk. Come to find out, the health food store, the ingredients were organic. But as you know, when you juice, you have a lot of enzymes present. They had switched to a biodegradable corn cup.
It's everywhere.
I was deathly ill for 4 days, and I knew what to do for the allergen. But this is where we have this is so pervasive throughout our food supply, and we have to get this law passed. It's just critical.
I want to address the experience with the animals, because what you're describing. First of all, I would love if you could send me that written up. This is very important. We collect information like that so we can share with others. This is a very, very clear example of what we're seeing. In terms of aggression and irritability among animals, we've seen and heard that all over the world. We have heard that pig farmers and cow farmers say that when their animals are switched to GM feed, they can become irritable, they can become aggressive or antisocial. When mice or rats are put on GM feed, they often get aggressive and bite their handlers, as opposed to the control groups that they can treat like pets. In fact, this was reported along with the physiological and neurological changes of animals fed GMOs by Dr. Don Huber in a German conference last year, and an autism expert came up to him and said, this is exactly what we're seeing in autistic children. And when you take the animals off of GMOs, their behavior improves, and this is something that, we've also heard. If you go to geneticroulettemovie.com, you can see until through Election Day for free online our movie, Genetic Roulette, The Gamble of Our Lives, and about 25 minutes into the movie, there are 3 parents of autistic children, including a doctor, who say that when they put their kids onto non-GMO diets, the behavior improved and the gastrointestinal disorders also dramatically improved. Now, there's reasons why GMOs might be a factor in autism, which we go into. It could be deal with the leaky gut aspect, the immune system aspect, and the gut bacteria aspect. But what you're describing in animals, it's like when a human avoids GMOs, there's a bunch of cofactors because they're not labeled as such. So you have to buy organic, or you have to buy products that are less processed or not processed. So there's other potential cofactors that may influence why someone feels better. But when an animal is switched from GM feed to non-GM feed, there's no cofactors, and it's very, very easy to track the difference. In fact, in the film, you'll also hear about how South African farm workers who were eating most of their food as genetically engineered corn were dying at 1 or 2 a month and had severe headaches and other problems. And when the animals switched to non-GM corn, because that's what was then grown for the next season on the farm, they spontaneously switched to non-GMO corn, and their problems went away. All the health problems eliminated until the farmer ran out of the non-GM corn, had to buy the GM corn in the market, and the problems for the humans and the dairy cows and pigs all returned until he was able to secure a permanent supply of non-GMO corn.
Jeffrey, whenever you disable, I know you know this, but I want to point it out for our listeners, whenever you disable the neurotransmitter serotonin, you will have irritability and rage. And there's only one thing in the world that will make the body make serotonin, and that is tryptophan. And tryptophan is an aromatic amino acid, and glyphosate is an herbicide that disables the enzyme to where the body or the plant cannot utilize the aromatic enzymes, which are tryptophan, phenylalanine, and tyrosine. So the irritability and rage is just simply a symptom of lack of serotonin. But a serotonin selective reuptake inhibitor, which is what many doctors will put their patients on, will not make the body make any more serotonin. One thing in the world is going to make the body make serotonin, and that is tryptophan. And we do have one, we also want to look at what are the solutions. The biggest solution, of course, is to require labeling. That's the biggest thing that's on our forefront. But another solution is Sun Formula does have phenylalanine and tryptophan in it that does not require the enzyme or the peptidase. And doctors can choose to put their patients on Sun Formula instead of putting them on an SSRI or a serotonin norepinephrine reuptake inhibitor, because those inhibitors will only make the brain more effectively use what serotonin or what norepinephrine is there. They will not make the body make any more of it. And trying to get your tryptophan from a turkey that's fed GMO corn, that's not going to do it. Not if the enzyme's been disabled in your body. You've got to get things that don't require the peptidase or the enzyme. And that's why Nancy Lee's book, Truly Cultured, is so important, because it's about how to ferment your own food.
That underscores the real importance of the digestive health, which, again, most people don't realize that. Such a bottom line of health, where your digestion is 78-80% of your immunity. This is your buffer for health. And obviously, from the studies now that are coming through, it's verifying that the genetically modified foods are attacking and undermining the digestive health of the population, along with a lot of other things, including the sugars, the carbs, electromagnetic and electric pollution, et cetera, et cetera. But it just keeps underscoring more and more the importance of good digestion, good probiotic bacteria to help give yourself that buffer, and good eating habits, and detoxifying your body, and avoiding the genetically modified foods, which obviously this Proposition 37 is so important. Jeffrey, can you tell us a little bit more about that specifically?
Yes. In California, on the ballot on Tuesday, is Prop 37, which would require the labeling of GMOs. 91% of Americans have wanted GMOs labeled for more than a decade, and this would give them that right. However, the other side has spent more than $1 million a day to try and confuse voters by saying that labeling is confusing. They're spending far more money than they'll ever spend on labeling, trying to say labeling is expensive. They're trying to say, oh, but it's not a strong enough labeling bill because there's exceptions, and so they're trying to flip it and say those that are in favor of labeling shouldn't want this either. So they're also saying it was designed by trial lawyers for trial lawyers, which of course isn't true. There's specific provisions to prevent runaway lawsuits. It's very, very reasonable. In fact, it's a very, very good, well-written proposition. It's just that the public relations arm of the biotech industry, Monsanto and Friends, has really done an excellent job of disinforming the population, such that our more than 2-to-1 lead has been chiseled down to just about 2 points. And so we're in a situation where they're putting on TV and radio ads and sent out at least 3 statewide mailers, all pounding in the same false information, so that even organic farmers are confused and saying, I don't want to burden farmers, so we're going to vote no on Prop 37. There's no burden on farmers. It is so easy. It is so ridiculously easy, and so that's the point we need to get out. So I'm going to encourage everyone who's on the call to get the word out to their friends in California that the other side, the biotech industry, they're experts at lying. That's what they do. The entire industry is built on deception. Back in 1992, the policy of the FDA was based on deception, claiming falsely that they weren't aware of information showing that GMOs were different, no testing was necessary, and no labeling was necessary. Well, it turns out that the overwhelming consensus among the scientists working at the FDA was just the opposite, and memo after memo released from a lawsuit proved that they were concerned about the health properties and warned of dangers with toxins, allergens, new diseases, and nutritional problems. But the person in charge of policy was Monsanto's former attorney, later Monsanto's vice president, now the U.S. Food Safety Czar, who ignored the concerns by the scientists. So the entire industry is layered with lies. They're very good at it, and that's why people are confused.
And Jeffrey, I will have to say that you have been one of the best, the most fastidious, the most conscious in getting the facts out and into your books, Seeds of Deception and Genetic Roulette, to unequivocally make it very clear. We've got a problem with this, and I think that if people who are on the fence about this issue would just go and visit your website, responsibletechnology.org, and watch the Genetic Roulette movie, they will be convinced. And I've known it from my own experience with people here in the community who had no interest in eating and really were, bragging about how they could eat anything. Once they saw the Genetic Roulette movie, that was like turning a light on. They switched their whole perspective. This one woman she bought copies for all of her children, her grandchildren, and they are now shifting their actions and their choices about it. So it is a powerful movie, and it will convince and demonstrate to people who don't even have a knowledge about this the importance of this topic and the importance of the Proposition 37 on the ballot in California. Thanks so much for your help.
Thank you. We've seen a lot of very good results from people watching the movie. One person went home and started dialing. I think she dialed about 600 people in California from her Rolodex, telling them to vote for Prop 37. Doctors are calling all the doctors that they know around the country, saying we got to see this film because this is a missing link. Why our patients are not getting better? We've just put out an extension for showing it for free. We're actually going to announce it today. We're going to be continuing to show it free through the election due to our generous sponsors. And we have some quotes from doctors who've seen the movie that went to the website to make comments saying this is really critical information, and we're now prescribing non-GMO diets to every patient, which is really terrific because that actually is something that is affecting now thousands and thousands of people through their prescriptions from their doctors.
That's huge. That is huge. This is so wonderful. There's one thing that's just fabulous that you've got on your site that will help people who are still in that state of confusion and trying to figure out, well, what can I buy? What can I eat? You've got a non-GMO shopping guide, and you even have a Shop No GMO for the iPhone. You have an app for that. Can you tell us how people can get those?
Sure. Go to nongmoshoppingguide.com. And there's over 4,000 products that have been third-party verified as non-GMO. And you can also understand the tips of how to avoid GMOs by learning the at-risk ingredients, what to look for on the label, etc. So at nongmoshoppingguide.com or the iPhone application Shop No GMO. And that'll bring you the same basic capabilities as the website right on your iPhone or iPad, and it's free. And
Excellent.
We find that people, when they learn about GMOs, they want to change their diet. There's no question. We get that all the time. In fact, I usually ask audiences to rate themselves from 1 to 100 how vigilant they've been in avoiding GMOs up until that point, and most Americans are not very vigilant. They're in the lowest category, 1 to 20. And then after I show the pictures of testicles that change from pink to blue in rats that were fed genetically modified soy, which always gets the guys, and I describe the changes in the uterus and the ovaries for the female rats, and the fact that more than half of the babies of GM soy-fed rats died within 3 weeks compared to only 10% death rate among the controls, and by the third generation on GM soy, the hamsters, most were sterile and some had hair growing in their mouths, and they also died at 4 or 5 times the rate. And the babies were smaller and fewer, etc. And I described the whole L-tryptophan epidemic in the 1980s from a genetically engineered variety that was produced in Japan that caused a deadly epidemic that was almost missed. And I described how the scientists who were actually discovering the problems were fired, stripped of responsibilities, forced out, threatened, and gagged, and how industry rigs its own research like tobacco science to force a conclusion of safety. I asked the audience to rate themselves how vigilant they'll be next week at avoiding GMOs, and there's no one in the 1 to 20 category at that point. Everyone is huddled around the highest 2 categories, 60 to 100, and they rush to get the pocket non-GMO shopping guide. The electronic versions are better, and then they start changing their diet. And this, I think, is an extremely important feature in activism, not just in personal health, because we know that when a small percentage of the population starts removing GMOs from their diet and the other major companies start seeing a drop in market share, they've already removed GMOs from their European brands and from Japanese brands because of consumer kickback. And if they see the same anti-GMO sentiment rising here, they will get rid of it here as well.
Well, the thing that amazes me is people aren't following the money, and they're not following the money because the neurotransmitters in their brain can't hook up, and they can't hook up because they're literally nutritionally starving.
Mm-hmm.
But But really, what we have to do is lean on our food manufacturers. We have had a lot of food manufacturers that have kicked in to defeat Proposition 37. What we need to do as consumers is not purchase those products. My partner and I went through, several years ago, we went through a major food supplier here in Fort Wayne, Indiana. They supply restaurants, hotels, hospitals, hospice, nursing homes. They are the food suppliers for those types of industries. And we were looking for 4 items. We were looking for canola, cottonseed, corn, soy, and we also looked for sugar. But primarily we looked for the top 4. Cottonseed, corn, canola, and soy. We found 2 items in an entire warehouse that did not have one of those 4 ingredients in it.
And remember, Judy, that, when you're eating in a restaurant, food service food that you are talking about is not required to be labeled. In retail products, they have the product ingredients in descending order. But in restaurant food, there is no requirement for that labeling. So you are taking a big chance because they don't have any incentive to make that information available.
How are we going to be able to change that, Jeffrey?
Well, the thing is, it's very easy. We think as little as 5% of U.S. shoppers avoiding GM ingredients would be sufficient to create the tipping point. This was very, very well illustrated in Europe on February 16th, 1999. Just 3 weeks earlier, the biotech industry was projecting that within 5 years, by 2004, they would have 99% takeover of all commercial seeds with their patented genetically engineered varieties. But when the gag order was lifted 3 weeks later on a scientist who had been an insider who had been testing to figure out how to test for the safety of GMOs, and his protocols were supposed to be used in the EU regulatory process, he discovered accidentally that GMOs were quite dangerous. And as a result, he went public with his concerns, was a hero for 2 days, and 2 calls were made from the UK Prime Minister's office to the receptionist, to the director of his institute. The next day, Dr. Pustai from the Aberdeen Rout Institute was fired from his job after 35 years, silenced with threats of a lawsuit. His 20-member team was disbanded. They never implemented the protocols. But when his gag order was lifted on February 16th, that's when there was a firestorm of news reports on GMOs in Europe that alerted people to the health dangers, and within 10 weeks, the tipping point of consumer rejection was achieved. Unilever, Nestle's, and virtually everyone committed to stop using GM ingredients in their European brands where people were concerned, but not in the U.S. brands where people didn't know. So, first of all, Prop 37, in my opinion, will handle it nicely. And even if it doesn't, if we don't pass Prop 37, and I hope we do, I think we're on track to create a tipping point nonetheless, because I think the very existence of Prop 37 is here because of the rising tipping point in the United States, as was the 19 different states that introduced labeling bills that didn't yet pass, as is the fact that non-GMO labels are one of the fastest-growing label claims in America for the past 3 years. All of these points are indicators of a rising tipping point in the United States.
Thanks to your work, Jeffrey.
Wow, that's just
not just
fabulous.
you, but you've been definitely leading it. It's a very important issue.
One of the things that INRC is going to be offering, it looks like it's going to be the end of the first quarter of 2013, is a weight loss clinic. And it's going to be taught by Dr. Luca Moretti, who is one of the formulators, and he's also the medical director for International Nutrition Research Center, who is the manufacturer of Sun Formula and MAP. And Sun Formula and MAP are the same ingredient. They are a small part of the solution to people who have been poisoned with genetically modified foods, because they are a fermented food product whereby you can get to the tryptophan and the phenylalanine even if that enzyme has been disabled in your body. But since we have had the glyphosate as a genetic modifier in our foods. We have gone in the last 16 years from one state with an obesity rate of over 30% to 49 states with an obesity rate of over 30%. And the one state that is not over 30% is Colorado, and they are at 29.9%.
Well,
this is absolutely huge in what the health costs are going to be down the road.
Not only obesity, but diabesity. That's the two arms of the same problem, a conglomeration of the word diabesity and obesity. They are paired together and basically undermining. They're our biggest health problem in this whole country now.
We are seeing people who have been feeding their dogs food that is basically genetically modified, and the dogs and the cats are getting tumors. But if they switch the food to organic foods, quite often those tumors are going away.
We have in the movie Genetic Roulette, The Gamble of Our Lives, a clip from Dr. Michael Fox, who's a veterinarian, and he is the animal doctor, the syndicated columnist with 25 to 30 million readers. So he's in a unique situation where he gets correspondence from people all over the country. And when he was aware when GMOs were introduced, he was receiving letters from pet owners saying that their cats and dogs were getting sick in unprecedented levels. They were getting allergic reactions and itching, gastrointestinal problems, including inflammatory bowel, diarrhea, etc. So he told his pet owners, get rid of the GM soy and corn, and the problems went away. He has a file drawer full of letters saying that it went away. Other veterinarians, however, were prescribing special science diets and things like that, which didn't solve the problem because they still contained the genetically engineered soy and corn, because they were totally unaware of the fact that our entire food supply had just been taken over by Monsanto, etc. So it's very, very interesting to look at the pets because, as he points out, the pets are they eat the byproducts of the human industrial food system. And so they just eat what we, the leftovers, so to speak. So they are an excellent example of what can go on with these animals.
I just cannot understand why, when we are really supposedly one of the most free countries in the world, I just can't understand why 50 other countries label genetically modified organisms, but in the United States we've been kept in the dark for the last 20 years.
Well, that's because the FDA, which should have mandated labeling, is also mandated to promote the biotechnology industry. It is one of their official goals to promote biotechnology. And they know that 53% of Americans would avoid GMOs if labeled. Therefore, they refuse to abide by the desire of 9 out of 10 Americans for labeling and to protect the economic interests of 5 biotech companies. So it's a ridiculous equation, but unfortunately, it's exemplary of what we've come down to with the corporate interests. Now, with food, we have a way of voting directly with our dollars where we don't have to be altruistic. It's not like a more like a farm worker issue or a factory farmer issue or factory worker issue. People will avoid GMOs like they'll avoid genetically modified corn chips if they realize that eating a corn chip has corn that produces a toxic insecticide that might break little holes into their intestinal walls, and the gene that produces the Bt toxin might transfer into their gut bacteria, turning it into living pesticide factories even after they've digested out their corn. So knowing these type of things, we can provide enormous incentives for people to avoid eating GMOs, and that, we think, makes the GMO issue much easier to solve than things that require major policy decisions like global warming and things like that. So we're in a very good position to win this. It's simply a matter of education.
I think it's also a matter of consumers taking it one step further, and that one step further is one of the things I've become very alarmed about is how many genetically modified ingredients are not only in foods, they're also in supplements. I recently called a major manufacturer and asked them what was the source of their amino acid product, and the source of their amino acid product was soy. And I said, is that product genetically modified? And they couldn't answer me. Several days later, I got a call back because I just kept asking. I said, I will buy this product, I will stock this product if you can certify to me that this product is non-GMO from the source. Now, there are over 50 medical doctors who are on the board of directors of this company. These are medical doctors who are really leaders in the nutrition industry. And the company representative called me back and said the base is genetically modified soy. Well, so what needs to happen is consumers need to call that manufacturer and say, this is the ingredient, this is betaine, say this is betaine hydrochloride. Is your source non-GMO beets? Can you certify that there are no genetically modified ingredients in the supplement? And if people start calling and asking these questions and start writing and asking these questions, that will help further to drive that marketing message to the manufacturers.
Absolutely.
And most people won't do that. I'm telling you, don't put your dollars. You may have to work, if you're working for $10 an hour and you're buying a $30 supplement, why would you work 3 hours to pay for a supplement that is a neurotoxin?
Well, I've got good news. Yesterday I called a restaurant in San Francisco, which I do before I go out to eat, to ask them what kind of oil they cook in, because I don't eat genetically engineered soybean, canola, corn, or cottonseed oil. And I got it first. They said, well, we use in our deep fat fryer, we use non-GMO rice bran oil. Now, I've heard places using rice bran oil, but they were out front saying non-GMO rice bran oil. I didn't have to ask. I didn't have to mention that I was trying to avoid GMOs. That's what they answered. And I said, I'm going to come there now. They said it took us a lot of time and a little bit extra money, but we finally were able to replace all of our genetically engineered oils. And I said, that's terrific. You've got my business. And so I showed up, and then later, as I left, I gave them my card and said, I want to thank you so much for doing what you're doing. Please thank the manager. This is so great, because we need to give that kind of feedback everywhere we go, just like you're doing to the supplement manufacturers. We got to do it also to the restaurants that we go to, etc.
Vote with our dollars.
Can you share with us the name of that restaurant?
Yes, it's called Dosa, and it's in San Francisco on Valencia.
On Valencia. I have a project that's been going since November of 2008 in San Francisco Bay. And so I go to San Francisco quite often, and the people there are very, very aware. We had a hard time when I was there. California is an easier state to find organic foods and organic restaurants, but it still is not easy. So it's wonderful to know one more.
Oh, yeah. And, we've been trying to think of ways for crowdsourcing GMO and non-GMO ratings for restaurants, and we're getting closer to that. I have a meeting today so that people who do the kind of research that I do and others do just to safe eat ourselves can pass that information on to others, which, of course, will increase the motivation of the restaurants to switch. But I think one thing that's happened in California is that because of Prop 37, so many people are now aware of GMOs that they were never aware of before. We have celebrities like Danny DeVito and Bill Maher and Rachel Maddow and others that have been talking about GMOs. Dick Van Dyke was on a recent thing saying, I'm Dick Van Dyke and I want to know. And it was very exciting to see it finally getting into far more of a mainstream coverage than ever before.
Okay, I'm really, really, really sorry to break up our party, but we've reached the end of our hour. Jeffrey, thank you so much for coming and sharing with us today, and for everything that you're doing on this issue. We're just absolutely in awe of the outpouring of information that's coming out on this issue, and all the work that you've done is just it's just bringing this awareness to everyone quicker and quicker, and we're gonna make some headway. I know it.
Thank you very much, and I'm glad to be part of this call, and I know that people are going to take this and share it, especially before the election.
Exactly.
Thank you, Jeffrey.
Yes, vote early if you can on Proposition 37. Get out and encourage your friends and your neighbors and your coworkers to vote yes on Proposition 37 in California. Thank you all.
Okay, God bless everyone. Take care. Thank you all for everyone who's participated and for dealing with our technical issues as we got started today. FreedomizerRadio.com. God bless.
God bless.